Welcome to the LA Business Podcast, a forum for business owners and senior executives to share the experiences about the elements that drive their success. Your host is Robert Brill, CEO of BrillMedia.co.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the LA Business Podcast. Today our guest is Daniel Ramsey, CEO and co-founder of MyOutDesk.com, MyOutDesk LLC. Thanks for being with us today, Daniel.
Yeah, Robert, it's my pleasure.
So tell us about MyOutDesk. What is it? And tell us about your journey on building this business.
Yeah, my favorite story, it starts in my honeymoon. So I'm in Guatemala. I'm actually crawling through the jungles with my wife of all 3 days. And as an entrepreneur, I found myself slinking to the bar at 1 a.m. because I literally had work that I had to do. And in that moment, I'm working, I'm drinking a beer, I'm relaxing. You know, you got monkeys swinging and making the noise in the background. There's this beautiful lake that feels like an ocean. It's so big. But at some point, the bartender is pissed because he's got to work because the guest is at the bar, right? He's got to be there. He can't go home until I leave, right? So he takes my cell phone and we become friends. He's only speaking Spanish to me. Takes my cell phone and takes it and basically starts making fun of me. Stupid white guy working. What's wrong with Americans? Beautiful bride back in his bungalow, you know. And at that moment, I had an epiphany. I knew that something had to change in my business for me to stay married, have a family, build a business. I felt like I had a business that owned me versus owning a business. And so, literally, we left the honeymoon and I told my wife, in a year or two, everything's going to be different and I'm going to fix this. And so I came back to the office and I worked really hard on learning leverage, scale, understanding how to grow the business, how to hire people. And 2 years later, we actually left the country and moved to South America for 6 months and continued to grow our 3 businesses. And so that's really why MyOutDesk got started, is I needed leverage in my business.
And what were you doing at that time when you were when you're on your honeymoon? What work were you doing at that moment?
Yeah, I'm still a real estate broker, but I was a developer, mortgage contractor, and we were developing projects and properties. And some of that work is just really hard to delegate down. But what I'd learned is that I hadn't put anything in a system or a process. I hadn't actually built the things that mattered in a business.
So what was the core thesis of MyOutDesk?
Yeah, so we buy back time. I mean, period. If you're an entrepreneur right now and you need leverage in your world, we help businesses buy back some of their most valuable asset, which is employee time. So we help people build either sales organizations, marketing teams, administrative support, and customer service. Those are our 3 areas. And we have, we've been in business now 13 years. We've served 6,000 people, and all of our folks are in the Philippines, which has actually been a really fun business learning thing for me to have different cultures and different locations. And we just serve entrepreneurs and businesses across the United States and in Canada.
So you have a double-sided marketplace in some respects, right? Like you need the supply of people who are ready and able to work, but you can't grow too fast on that side because then you need the demand. How do you manage that growth?
Well, you're absolutely right. In fact, one of our challenges early on was we were good at getting clients, but then there's that dual challenge of keeping clients, right? You have to service them, you have to love on them, you have to make sure they're happy. And so as we had early success and kind of broke that $1 million in revenue, we realized we hadn't invested in the service side of our business. So we poured money and resources and time and energy into that piece. And there's also this production and sales, right? We had to, our talent or our product is people. Like we help businesses find talent. So we had this dual challenge of we also have to find really good talent as well as find really good customers. So our whole world is centered around those 2 things: finding great talent here in the US who needs help, and then finding great talent in the Philippines who need work. So that's kind of how our business kind of evolved.
And what was your time frame to get to that first $1 million in revenue?
It's a great question. I think we hit that in the first 3 or 4 years. Virtual assistants back then, it was a new market. You'll laugh, Robert. I'd go to a conference, I'd get on stage, I'd be in front of thousands of people, and I'd say, I got this virtual assistant. company. And the very first question that I'd get, somebody would walk up to the mic and say, "What's a virtual assistant again?" I was like, oh my goodness. And so we kind of built this world. We were outsourcing our business before the 4-hour work week, before this thing really became popular. So we did a lot of educating the world about how to get leverage outside of the US. And think of it like this. A can of soda here in the US costs $2. That same can of soda in a developing world is 25 to 50 cents. All we're doing is helping companies that are small and medium find leverage in ways they've never thought possible. And the large companies, Kellogg's one of my favorite examples. Kellogg's, the cereals. My kids love Cheerios. Well, Cheerios, 80% of that company has actual employees outside of the US. And that's been the trend since the 70s and 80s. So we're simply bringing that opportunity to small and medium-sized businesses.
And what kind of services do you go into some detail, if you could, about like what people do with your business?
Yes, pretty simple. If you're an insurance person, we have a boat broker in Florida. We have a bunch of healthcare companies and IT companies. Here's the question. If you find yourself working on the evenings, working on the weekends, and you don't have enough time to finish everything that you need to get done in a particular day, that's how you know you need a service like ours. And typically my first need was I hated paperwork. I'm not a paperwork guy, right? I don't want to run a project or do paperwork. So the very first need that we filled was the administrative or operations side of a lot of businesses. Then we morphed and added calling or prospecting. So if you have a bunch of leads coming in every day to your business, and your best salespeople should be closing the deals, and our people can help nurture and get those appointments set for your best salespeople. Then we have marketing coordinators and design coordinators. So we had so much content, and we needed somebody to edit it, create copy, design stuff. And so literally each one of those needs is something that we had as a company ended up being a product for MyOutDesk. And then customer support, of course. At some point you have a lot of customers and they're going to have questions or needs. We help like IT companies, marketing companies, and insurance companies. Just somebody answers the phone.
So, I mean, my initial question is, let's talk about sales and design, right? Because those are actually two challenges that I feel comfortable like with the potential of outsourcing, right?
Yep.
My challenge is, number one, on the sales side. I mean, how do you get someone who doesn't have experience? So we're an advertising firm, marketing and advertising fundamentally. How do you get someone where English isn't their primary language and they're not immersed in English, right? They don't live in the United States, and they may not know the nuances of jargon. And I'm not talking about marketing jargon. I'm talking about like just American English jargon.
Yeah, great question.
How do you overcome those types of challenges? Because I know that if I get a phone call, and sometimes I just don't even take the call, especially if it says like scam likely or something like that, right? Like how do you overcome those challenges? Because I imagine you come across that enough, and you probably have some good answers for that.
Yeah, we wouldn't have a company if we didn't actually, offer a service that worked, right? Your question is, how do they
Does it work?
Yeah, it does work. And here's what's wild. Okay, so in the Philippines, 94% of the people actually are Catholic. So from a view of right and wrong, they're very aligned with the West, which is another good reason that country is in alignment with us. Number two, it's the number one spot to outsource for voice. So India used to own the world in terms of outsourcing, right? They were the first outsourcing to the UK and the British Empire. And at some point, the rest of the world said, okay, we're gonna put offices in India. And then what they learned was in the Philippines, actually about 40 years ago, the government said, you know what? We need one language that unifies all of the 7,200 islands in that country. And guess what? They have a different dialect in every single little location. So they adopted English as the main language. It's actually all of the medical journals, all of the street signs. If you go into a restaurant, it's in English. And so the whole country actually converted to an English-based education system and, for all intensive purposes, operational system as an entire country. So the English is great. The other thing is we only, like all the banks, DirecTV, Comcast, every major corporation has an office for their customer service in the Philippines. And so we have the beauty of hiring people who have 5-10 years of experience in communicating to US based people. So one of the things, we're not going over there and hiring an accountant and then putting them on a phones. We're going to find a phone salesperson who has spent 5 or 6 years selling credit cards, which, by the way, is a really challenging thing to do over the phone, selling credit cards for Chase, for instance. And we're going to simply have them come work for you, Robert, and help you sell your product. Number 2, we like 2-step marketing and sales processes. So as a company, and you'll identify with this, right? The marketing team says, well, the sales team can't close, and the sales team says the marketing team develops crappy leads, right? That's what everybody says. So I separate those two people. Like, we just pull them apart, and we have something called a sales development rep, and that is an ISA, kind of an inside sales agent or a sales development rep who is a virtual assistant who works for our company. And when a lead comes in, when a lead says, I'm interested, our virtual assistants reach out and qualify how much revenue, who's on your team, what's the need, how did you hear about us, who do we need to thank, and they do a qualifying, basically, framework. We don't believe in scripts here at MyOutDesk, but they do a qualifying conversation with the lead, and then they set the appointment for the sales team. That way, my sales team, they can't say the leads suck, because if a person shows up and they're qualified to buy based on our framework, then the salesperson's like, okay, I've got to close them, and it's my responsibility to close them. So in our world, it's been really fun to have over 2,500 people. Think about 2,500 sales development reps have come through our doors over the last 13 years, and we've helped companies implement this 2-step sales process. And I have personally learned a lot. Our team has learned a lot, and it's been one of the high points for our company.
That's absolutely fascinating. Like, I've never been so, frankly, sold on.
Good. That's why we're here today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So tell us about the design work. How do you implement, like, design? There's the art of design, then you get into copywriting and stuff like that, or is that?
Yeah, here's the thing. Most companies, when they come, they raise their hand to either your company or our company. It's because they don't know how to do something, right? And typically, our people don't work well in nobody knows how, and we're going to hire somebody. What we look for is a marketing process already set up, a system already. We like, and we use something called the repurpose system. We've got a great blog on it on our website. Basically, is where you take a video recording like you and I are doing right now. Then you create a blog post, you chop it up, put different social medias out there. You create a long blog post, and basically you'll take an audio recording or some piece of content that is video related, and you'll create multiple different pieces of content. That's our favorite way to work with our virtual assistants, and we have design coordinators who can take an edit and take a piece of content like this and chop it up and break it up into the different various ways that you can use this. And we also have content writers who will take a piece of content like this and actually create a blog post. Those are typically 2 different styles of people, but we always live and do best in somebody else's already set up system and process. And, when people are like, I really need more marketing, what they're really saying is, I need to learn how to market. Right. And that's where a company like yours comes in.
What's really interesting to me is we literally today, as we're recording this, we onboarded a new account manager.
Nice.
The account manager is going to help us partially with the marketing work.
Yep.
Because it's kind of like part-time marketing, part-time account management at this point. Yep. And literally what you described about cutting up content is like about half her job description.
Yeah.
So like, I would actually look at you for that as well. That's fascinating. So tell us about tell us about the tactics you've used to grow the business. I see you've been doing this since 2008. Tell us about the evolution you've had in this business.
One of the early and one of my favorite revelations as a CEO, a business owner, founder, is that we don't produce a product. Like, we don't build something. We're a sales organization, and so because of that, we've created a lot of capacity around sales. And I'll give you your audience. We actually have a book called Scaling Your Business with Mod Virtual Professionals. And what's cool about this business is there's a chapter in there talking about referral strategies. And so we break referrals into three main categories. Referrals are a personal introduction. Like Robert says, Daniel knocked it out of the park, and you give me another podcast to be on, right? And you send a personal introduction to that other podcaster. So that would be an example of a referral. A recommendation is something where, like, Robert goes on our website and writes a review, says, hey, Daniel did a fabulous job. We've really appreciated hiring his virtual assistants. We would give you a 5-star, recommendation. That is an example of a video recommendation that we would put and publish on our website. And then a review is just an online review where you go to Google or Facebook or some other review site. And so we call that process the 3 R's. And every interaction that we're having with a customer, our job is to serve them. I'm here because I want the world to know that we exist and are an opportunity if you need leverage in your world. So we're here because we want to serve the general public and let them know that this is something they could actually do inside of their business. So as long as a sales organization understands they're in service of their customers and clients and their vendors and people in their world, then it's very easy to ask for one of our 3 R's, a review, recommendation, or a referral.
So you've primarily grown through those 3 R's.
Well, we call it the 3 R's, and every single month, for as long as I can remember, 25 to 30% of our business comes from the 3 R's.
And what about the other 60, 75%?
Yeah, it's a good question. We're a content-based company. So when people say, how do you generate revenue? We put out a whole bunch of content. So our book has a lot of content about how to hire a virtual assistant. What are the systems and tools that you need? How do you onboard them into a team? What are some of the biggest challenges when you're hiring these folks? So we create a lot of content around how virtual assistants work and how to grow and scale a business utilizing them. And we put that out in the universe, and then we hope to cast a large net.
So I imagine, considering that we met through Haro, Help a Reporter Out, through your PR team, I would imagine that PR is a part of your success as well.
Yeah, we do a lot of reach out to podcasters, news organizations. We do a lot of that because it's like it's another lead source that is really popular in the world. It's not easy though. I'll tell you, it's the last thing we added because having like Haro and Cision and some of the other PR related systems are very expensive, and you typically have to hire a person to focus on it. And so the other piece about growing and scaling a business is you want to start, developing systems and processes for the things that are already working. So referral strategies, being a sales organization, serving our clients, reaching out to our network, those things we already had in process. And so around 2 or 3 years ago, we started adding PR as another layer of marketing strategy to the business.
As COVID hit around the world, I don't know if you maybe were privy to seeing it kind of play out earlier than March. I don't know the timeline for the Philippines. Tell us about how it affected MyOutDesk, how it affected the supply, the demand. Like, do you see an increase in business now because people are looking for? There's always I think my fundamental thesis here is that when there's a recession and a depression, there's always going to be a flight to value. Yeah. And if there's anything, I think you guys are providing outsized value for companies that know how to use your services effectively, who have a process in place. So I guess the question is, as COVID made its way around the world, January, February, March, how did you react? What was the impact to your business? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I learned a lot and made a lot of mistakes as a CEO and a founder. We did some things really, really right early on in March. Because we're a completely virtual company, so what's cool about that is again 1,300 folks. Everybody works remotely. We have a small team in the U.S. of about 20 employees, U.S. based employees, and we did some upfront kind of stuff where everybody went home and set up their internet and their computers and cameras and made sure that there was going to be no interruption of business. We did that prior to the shutdown, and we're in California, so we shut down very early. Next, one of the things that I talked about during that time frame is that we are all in business to exchange value. To your point, your thesis is spot on. I'm 100%. If you add value to a customer's business, they will give you money. That's how it works, regardless of pandemic or anything. It doesn't really matter what's going on in the world. If you're exchanging value, then you have a business, right? And so early on, we took over 1,200 people through the PPP stuff, and for it was the payroll protection program, and before like the Treasury announced the rules, before the banks knew what the heck they were doing, we had some experts who had some inside information, and because we had them, we took every single one of our customers through. What are the different options? How am I going to apply? What do I need to prepare for it? Like, we literally did webinars where one of our webinars actually had 400 people, where we dove deep into who should be using PPP and who shouldn't, and what are the ramifications, and what do you have to prove. And so early on, we, number one, helped people get the money that they needed to sustain through March and April. Next, we were working towards value proposition. We have a great company on the northeast side of the country. They're a cleaning company. They became a COVID cleaning company, the only certified one, and they actually went through some training and had their PPP or PPE or personal protective equipment. Yeah, PPE. A lot of P's in this podcast. They had their stuff all prepped early, and they became the first certified COVID cleaning company. And so we were helping companies really redefine themselves. Most businesses generate, business from referrals and people in their network and people that they know, or conferences. Well, guess what? That's not going to work anymore. So we're helping them zig and zag to do going remote, number one, and then number two, getting digital. How do I go digital? And I'm sure you guys had a massive increase in people who wanted help in the marketing world. So, you asked how we did a lot of things wrong, but those are some of the things that we did right.
What's interesting about that is, okay, so I'll go a roundabout way. When I started paying attention to like WeWork, one of the ways that WeWork described themselves is as a lifestyle company.
Yeah.
Like, we're not just a provider of office space for business owners. We're actually a social network.
Sure.
So I'm hearing you talk, and I'm thinking, wow, you also are an aggregator of attention. And like, if you're getting into the PPP world of talking about advice on how business owners, small and mid-sized business owners, can navigate PPP, you're now far away from virtual professionals. You're like now a lifestyle help for businesses, not lifestyle, but you're a provider of attention. You're a gatherer of attention. You're using that attention.
Here's the methodology. And if you're listening right now, I think this works whether you're in a downturn, a pandemic, or you're in an upswing. Our thought was, what do our clients need right now in this moment? What is the thing that's on their mind? What's causing them frustration, harm, worry? And can we, with our resources, we're a large company, so can we, with our resources, help alleviate some of that pain? And honestly, that's all marketing is, right? Speaking to pain points, understanding the customer journey, and then trying to add value. And then when the customer says, you know what, actually, we're now growing again, which this is to your earlier question, we've had massive amounts of growth over the last 4 or 5 months because everybody did go remote. Everybody got their PPP money. And then they remember us because we were there We did a lot of workouts. I'll tell you, we had customers call us with over 10% of our customer base in a 30-day period raised their hand and said, we need help. And we went in and we helped them. And so, yeah, whether it was right or wrong, it just felt like in this time we had to play a part of helping small and medium-sized businesses stay afloat in March and April, so that in May and June, as it did when everything turned around, they knew we were here to support them.
Fascinating. Yeah. Seems like business is picking up. Like, at least for us, business is pretty aggressively picking up over the last few months. Advertisers coming out of the woodwork who we've never worked with in the past are just approaching us, and we're working with them. And I also have an independent business solution, which is much more affordable. It's $1,500 a month. It's fascinating. I'm going to talk to you about other things because I think there's a really interesting way for us to kind of like work together. What does the next 6-12 months look like for you? What are people asking for? What types of services kind of like are most in demand for you right now?
Well, what's exciting for us is prior to this, most people were like, wait, so your assistant isn't going to be in my office. I'm not going to be able to touch, feel, train them. I'm like, no, they're working remote. So, and everybody was like, how does that work? Pandemic, 100% of the world just got educated on how to work remotely. We're all working from home. We're all, at some stage doing what we call a blended model, where some of your time is in an office and some of your time is home. And wildly enough, many people are reporting that they're not only more productive, but they're happier. They're spending time with their family. They're seeing their kids. They're getting deep work done because there's not like that constant knock on the door. So for us, we only see growth happening regardless if the pandemic turns into another economic crisis or not, because I believe the world is now onto this idea of a remote workforce being the norm moving forward. So that's good for us. And then secondly, more and more people are creating those blended teams where some of the work is done by a US person whose expertise, maybe licensed, maybe has that 10 years of experience. And then everything else that isn't client facing or that isn't high expertise is done with somebody in the background. And so we're only seeing growth going forward. We're excited about the number of consultations. We actually passed 400 a month consultations where we literally are doing one-on-ones through Zooms where we talk about who's on your team, what are your systems and process, what are your 3 biggest challenges, which of those challenges could we solve for you, which ones do you need to hire a company like yours or hire a team member there locally. And so it's been really exciting because most of the time we're helping entrepreneurs and CEOs and C-suite people really reimagine this new digital future where the world is remote. And so that's been super, super fun.
Do you aspire to expand the brand outside of, I guess what I'm saying is you look at like publications like Inc. magazine and Forbes and Fast Company, and these companies are having festivals and conferences, and they have all kinds of things. And I'm looking at your business. I'm thinking you guys are in a way like a grocery store. You have access to the right people. Like, I want to have access to your clients. Like, I want to provide them marketing services, not that conflicts with what you do, but that adds to what you do, right?
Sure.
So I'm like, when I found out, I don't know when I found this out, but like grocery stores charge for certain places in the grocery store to prominently display their products. They're basically selling their real estate.
Yeah.
So you have access to some of the best, some of the most, like, your audience, your customers are great people that I want to connect with in a way that wouldn't cannibalize anything you do, right? Do you have any aspirations to throw conferences or to kind of take what you're doing with the PPP and the education and the webinars and codify that into a bigger thing that you can now do with the attention that you have?
Yeah, we've actually just hired actually a videographer, and we're working towards actually a mastermind group where we pull all of our clients together. There's something really powerful. And I've been in peer groups for most of my entrepreneurial journey, but looking back in the beginning, they would have made a massive impact. And so I'm looking at my own journey saying, well, when I got into a peer group, I experienced massive growth. So why couldn't we bring that to our clients? And so we're toying with that right now. We're working towards building out that system and process so that we can actually effectively take, I think we have 1,000 clients, but effectively bunch them together in small pods of 6 to 8, where they can get that peer support, accountability, help them build their business. And then as a group, put on, virtual events where we're teaching and helping them and really providing value at a high level. And then individually in that mastermind, they can discuss it and work together to implement. So we're working towards that. The book was the first step. I mean, we codified exactly how we do what we do in this book. And I poured my heart and soul into writing the thing. And it really took 2 years. If you can imagine 2 years to write 120 pages, I mean, it really, and the other thing about the book is it's not, and I hate this about academics, right? You go to a conference, some guy who gets $100,000 to be there, who's never owned a business, never really built anything, but, has a speaking platform, and they tell you what they think they should do, but their organization is 5 guys in total. Our intention is to put people on the spotlight who have built large organizations, who've walked the walk, who understand how hard it is to break that $1 million and then break 10 million and then break 50 million. Those are the 3 categories, by the way, of large businesses. So 96% of businesses never break $1 million, never. And then 4% ever get between 1 million and 10. And then only 17,000 out of 28 million ever get past $50 million in revenue. So it's hard to be an entrepreneur. It's hard to not have a tribe or a peer group. And so we just want to support people as they go on their journey.
I love that. I did not know the statistic about the 4%. We squarely fall into that 4%.
Love it. Congratulations.
Thanks. So what is your role at the company? I imagine one thing I've heard recently is that the chief executive officer is the head salesperson. And that's a characterization. Doesn't have to be that way. I would also call the CEO as the chief evangelist for the organization. What do you do at your organization, and how do you divvy up responsibilities between your senior leadership?
I love the question. A good friend of mine owns a plumbing company, and I'm just going to tell you this story because I think it's so great. I asked him one time, so what do you do? Because it's a large plumbing company. He goes, look, 3 years into our new space, and they just bought an office and a shop and a yard, and they have something like 50 trucks or some insane amount of CapEx in their equipment because they're a plumbing company and they're specialized. And he walked into his shop, which is three different doors, and it's one of those tall things, and there's a mechanic, and he couldn't find anything. The tools were all spread out. Nothing there were no stations set up, and yet they have 50 trucks that are worth $100,000 each. And he looks at it and he's like, this drives me insane. As the CEO and the founder of my company, this has got to stop. And so he spent 2 weeks straight getting every single tool a spot. Every piece of equipment had a spot. Then he had an oil changing spot. Then he had a mechanic spot. And then he had another spot. And so he built in this shop, in his 3-drawer shop, basically a system and a process for maintaining his vehicles. And he has a shop foreman and a couple of mechanics. And he did this in 2 weeks and sweated and did hard work and worked with his guys. But after it was done, he's like, guys, I never, ever want to see it the way it was 2 weeks ago when I came in here. And so our job as a CEO, sometimes I'm the head customer service person. Sometimes I'm the head salesperson. Sometimes I'm our CFO. Sometimes I'm on a podcast with you and I'm talking, about building businesses and whatever. But The reality is, I can tell you my job. My job is to serve our customers, and my job is to serve our employees. And my job is to be in relationship with our vendors and see if there's a way the collaborative effect of being in relationship with our vendors can serve either our employees or our customers at a higher level. And so, if you want to ask, what does a CEO do? It's a lot of service.
It's everything is your responsibility. The especially the failures.
Yeah.
So Daniel, how can people find you if they want to book you on their podcast or talk to you? And tell us a little bit more about the book. Tell us about how people can contact you and all the different touch points.
Yeah. So if you're listening and anything that I've said is interesting, we've got it in a book. You can actually text the number 31996 and with this message SVP. So Sam Victor Paul, Scale with Virtual Professionals, to 31996. You'll get a copy of the book. It's either a Kindle download or a PDF. Next month, we'll actually have an Audible. I'm really excited about that because, it's kind of a pain to record yourself reading a book. So I'm super stoked about that. But if you wanted to come to the website, check out what we do. We have a lot of good content on our blog sites and our media pages. And you can request a consultation and you can walk through this process that we're talking about. Funny enough, one of our family friends, she's a child psychologist, and she was breaking down her process to help families and kids deal with emotional issues. And then I was breaking down our sales process, and we both looked at each other and go, oh my God, it's the same. And the reality is, when you're helping somebody grow and scale, and if you go through one of our consultations, we're going to walk you through basically a time-tested, proven model that therapists, insurance brokers, everybody walks through. What are your big challenges? Who's on your team? What do you need to double your business? Like, that's the process. And we'll guide you through what your next best 2, 3, 4 steps are and whether or not you'd be a fit for our business.
So the website is MyOutDesk.com. It's been staring at us for the entire duration of this episode. I love your backdrop, by the way. I gotta say, I love my backdrop, especially because my wife organized it. Like it's an expression of love from my wife, which is great. The one thing I'm missing is what you got, which is a big URL. Fantastic. Cool. Daniel Ramsey, CEO and co-founder, MyOutDesk.com. Thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, Robert, thanks for having me.